techniques do the trend-setting major establishment media use to advance their attacks on Donald Trump? Well, two recent stories in the New York Times and Washington Post are most revealing of subliminal methods used by the Times and Post to allow them to publish shocking headlines seeming to imply that Donald Trump, both before and after his election as president, could have been a deliberate or unwitting agent of Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin. I'm Tim Donner with 5 facts about these stories presented not as opinion but as news, and how they exemplify the techniques used by the legacy media in reporting on President Trump. Fact 1. The New York Times headline actually implies that Trump may have committed treason. Look at this headline. Often the only thing people see. It puts in play the notion that Trump is no less than a Russian agent and traitor to his country. And that leads us to fact 2. The New York Times' use of the word whether enables them to advance shocking claims without making a direct accusation. Note the headline. FBI opened inquiry into whether Trump was secretly working on behalf of Russia. And later in the story, law enforcement officials investigated whether Trump was knowingly working for Russia or had unwittingly fallen under Moscow's influence, or whether his firing of Mr. Comey constituted obstruction of justice. Using the word whether could just as easily allow them to run a headline like investigation underway on whether Trump committed murder, with no mention of who's investigating or whether the charge has any credibility. Fact 3. There's nothing new in either the Times or Post stories. As in so many other instances of recycling old and unproven charges against Trump, we learn nothing new. But the Times uses the concern of law enforcement professionals as the hook for their spectacular headline. We already knew that Trump was under investigation, that he has been accused by Democrats and the left for his entire presidency of colluding with Putin, that professional law enforcement officials had previously expressed concerns about what's been termed Trump's erratic behavior. All of those were rehashed under attention-getting headlines that became the subject of debate inside the Beltway for days. The restated concern of anonymous ex-law enforcement officials about Trump's conduct does not constitute news. Fact 4. The story also implies that Trump's firing of James Comey was unlawful. Trump has undeniable constitutional power as president to fire anyone in the executive branch for any reason or no reason. They serve at his pleasure. Trump said publicly 3 times something Comey refused to say, but also refused to contradict, that Trump was not a subject of the FBI investigation. And yet, by purporting to read Trump's mind and speculating about a nefarious purpose behind the firing, the Times and Post continue to float the idea that Trump obstructed justice. Members of Congress are not required to explain their votes. Supreme Court justices are not required to explain their decisions. And presidents are not required to justify their decisions to hire and fire employees in their own executive branch. And that brings us to fact 5. The story says nothing about how this investigation ended. No mention is made of what, if any, conclusions were drawn by the unnamed law enforcement officials cited in the story, only that an investigation was launched. This hardly meets any long-held standard of journalistic integrity. The story should properly have concluded with the results of this investigation. Instead, it leaves readers hanging with the possibility, launched in its own headline, that Trump is actually a Russian agent. With multiple studies revealing that over 90% of established media coverage of this president has been negative, those are 5 facts which demonstrate the subliminal techniques employed by the most elite of elite media to keep spectacular accusations against Trump in the headlines. Please subscribe to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel to get these 5 facts and Truth TV, author interviews, our Uprising podcast, Liberty Nation Radio, and more. I'm Tim Donner. Thanks for watching.